Hello, hello, hello. How's everybody today? Hope y'all having a wonderful, wonderful Monday. Last one of this month. Kind of chill out today, which is surprising this deep in April. Every time I think this weather done broke and we just gonna be in the warm weather, Mother Nature be like, not yet, not yet. But I hope y'all having a wonderful Monday, as I have. And now we're here to jump into this Word of God, which always is the best way to end my Monday. I don't know about you guys, but I love when I get to do this. I love when you guys come in here so I can do this. Best way to end my Mondays. So I just give a couple of minutes, just as always. Actually, once I find my place, I'm probably going to get started because I do got a little bit of a little small review from the previous lesson because it is a continuation. But I will probably find my spot and then go ahead and get started. And whoever's going to come in is going to come in. If they don't come in now, maybe they're going to come in later. Gotta find my lesson. I do a lot of lessons with y'all, man. A lot of writing involved. All right, so I got my spot there. Get everything set up and clean my spectacles. Now I'm probably gonna jump into this. All right, spectacles clean. Get some quality H2O. All right, I think I'm ready to get started. So how's everybody tonight? Again, thank y'all for being here today. Welcome to Lost Sheep Ministries on behalf of River Lake Baptist Church. Oh, got that. I did it correctly. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did all that. Thank you for being here tonight. This is Monday evening, last Monday in April. Of course, I'm John Stewart on behalf of Lost Sheep Ministries, ministry of River Lake Baptist Church. Here to bring you all a lesson tonight on the will of God. I know we've been in this series for quite some time. And of course, it's because I want to take my time. When anytime I'm doing something that's dealing with the will of God or helping people find the will of God or understand the will of God, I always want to take my time with it because it's so very important. Matter of fact, one of the points that I'm going to bring up tonight, and don't want to get ahead of myself, is going to talk about how important it is to be in the will of God. The will of God is very important. Again, outside of accepting Jesus as your Savior, it is probably the most important thing that you'll do. Other decisions you'll make is not only accepting the Savior as the first decision, and then the second decision you make, if you really want to have a close relationship with the Lord, you really want the Lord to use you, is about making the decision that you're going to follow His will for your life. And that's why I'm taking time with it. I think it's going to be part number 7 tonight. Might finish it up tonight. Not sure because I know there's a little bit left in chapter 10. This is only half of chapter 10. I know I'm only going to get through half of chapter 10 tonight. But the second portion of chapter 10 is start to deal with other things. So it might change a little bit. I'm not sure. I haven't had a chance to look that far ahead yet because I got like 5 points from what I did for the first half. And y'all know I've barely been making through 3 here lately. So, but thank y'all for being here. Of course, I appreciate y'all for being here as always. And I just thank you for participating in this ministry. It's been a blessing. It's been encouraging for me to continue to come through and do these lessons, especially when I see my faithful people that's in here listening every week. It really blesses my soul. So I thank y'all for being here tonight. And if you, we're going to be in, we're going to first, so last week we finished up 1 Samuel 9. And again, that was part 6 of the series that we've been doing on the success and the will of God. And of course, it's all in the same section. It's just that's how long it's taking me to get through it. Because like I said, I want to take my time and explain each point because it's so very important that you understand how important it is to follow the will of God for your life. So we're going to be, so we finished up chapter 9 last week. And like I said, the first half of chapter 10 kind of still dealing with success in the will of God. Then it kind of branches off to another different lesson toward the end of chapter 11. I mean, chapter 10, and then on into chapter 11. But we'll get to that next week, Lord willing. But so if you got your Bibles you want to open up, we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 10, starting at verse 1. And just a quick review of what we did last week. Like I said, last week we finished up chapter 9. I did the final 3 points I did last week. And so it was 3 points last week, but it was point number 20 in the lesson overall for chapter 9. So number 20 from last week, just again, quick review to kind of cover what we went over last week before we jump into this week. Number 20 from last week was have a place where you meet with God. And we had discussed previously in the lesson, just as you have a set time that you, just as you have a set time to meet with God, you should also have a place where you meet with God. And we saw how Samuel called Saul up on the roof and talked to him there. That was their place to meet. And you got to, like I said, it's very important for you to have a place where you meet, where it can just be you and God, and so that way you can hear God clearly. Because this world is always going to try to pull you away from the things of God. It's going to always try to distract you from the things of God. It's going to get in the way of you hearing the message from God. So if you can't separate from that and have your place to go, and you can get away from the world and it just be you and God, it's going to be hard for you to get the message. And I talked about having like a war room. If you saw that movie, The War Room, and I think I told y'all too, we get ready to move here soon. And one of the main things as we've been looking at new places, one of the main things I've looked for, am I going to have a spot where I can continue to go and do these lessons and, and get off. And not only do I do my lessons here in this spot, this is where I do my Bible study at. This is where I do my praying at. This is my war room. So that was one of the main things when we was deciding which house we were going to go, we were going to move to. One of the main things I was looking for, because, my wife and the kids, they were looking for other stuff. But the main thing I was looking for was I going to have a space where I was going to be able to go and get along with God. And the place we chose, I do have that. So matter of fact, this will be my last lesson from this particular spot. So next week, I'll be in a different location. Maybe at the house, might not, because with the internet situation where we at, we might not have internet next Monday. We will know, because I'm going to be moving this weekend. But either way it goes, the show's going to go on, whether it's here, whether it's in my new place, or even though I have to just stay at work and do it in my office's work, it will go on. So I hope y'all will be here. But again, the whole point was have a place, have somewhere that you go where you meet with God on a regular basis. Have time that you meet with God on a regular basis, and then have a place that you go when you have that meeting with God, so you can hear God clearly. So that was number 20 from last week, which was the first point from last week. Number 21 from last week was you got to be willing and ready to work. You can't be lazy and sleeping around all day and not be willing. You got to be willing to work. If you're going to serve God's will, if you're going to do the will of God, there's going to be some work involved. This is me. These lessons I'm doing for you guys, these lessons I put together, my Bible reading, all these things is part of the work that I do. I'm not doing it to get to heaven, but I'm doing it because I want to fulfill God's will for my life. And me being on here on Monday nights, running my mouth for y'all, let me run my mouth for hours now. Nobody never stopped me. Y'all just let me do it. But it's all part of the work that I'm doing to build God's kingdom. So you got to be willing to work. You got to understand, if you're going to be in the will of God, you say you want the will of God, you really want to make change in your life, you want to do the things that God has for you to do, then you got to understand there's going to be some work involved. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be less today. I know when I first got into it, I was kind of sidetracked back there, like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, I'm serving God now and everything's going to be all easy and hunky-dory. And I found out real quick that it wasn't. There was a lot of work involved, a lot of sacrifices involved, and a lot of things that I had to do. So if you're going to get, think about making that decision about, really giving your whole heart to doing God's work, will, this will help you be able to stay in His will, to know that it's not going to be easy. There's going to be some work involved. So that was number 21 from last week. Be willing to work. You can't be lazy and thinking you're going to be able to do God's will, because there's going to be some work involved. And then number 22, which was the last point that finished up 1 Samuel chapter 9, was be willing to separate from anyone or anything that can hinder you from finding the will of God for your life. And of course, that's something I've talked about on several different lessons. So, and it always keeps popping up because it's so vital. It's so pivotal in your relationship with the Lord, and especially if you're really trying to follow His will. Because as you're trying to follow God's will, there's going to be some people, there's going to be some things, there's going to be some people, there's going to be some places that are going to pop up in your life, or there's always really been a part of your life before you really got in the will of God that you're going to have to leave behind. You're going to have to stop, things you're going to have to stop doing. Places you're going to have to stop going, people you're going to have to stop hanging with. All those things are going to be a part of finding the will of God for your life and doing the will of God for your life. There's going to be some things, and I kind of talked about last week. It don't necessarily mean that they are bad things. It doesn't necessarily mean, oh, you got to separate from these people because they are bad people and you're better than that. That's not necessarily the case. It's just that for whatever reason, those people, not necessarily because they're bad, but maybe they're just not on the same thing that you're on. Maybe they're not going in the same direction that you're going. And if you don't separate from them, it's going to keep you from following God's will for your life, because you're going to try to follow them, which they're not necessarily following God's will for their life. Again, not because they're bad, just because they haven't made a decision. Like I said, no, everybody don't make the decision. A lot of people know is that few are called, many are called, but many are called, but few are chosen, something like that. But a lot of people get called to follow God's will for their life, and a lot of people don't. I talked to a lot of people, especially when I was in the jails and going out soul winning and things like that. I talk to people all the time and say, oh yeah, God called me to preach, but I just that wasn't really what I wanted to do at that time. Several guys I've talked to in jail, yeah, I used to be a youth minister, I used to be this and that. And I knew God wanted me to do this work, but then, I kind of got out of it, and then they end up in jail because they followed their own will instead of God's will. So that's why sometimes you got to separate from people, places, and things. Again, not because they're bad people, not because they're bad places, not because they're bad things, but if you keep these people, places, and things in your life, it could possibly hinder you from doing the work that God has for you to do. So number 22, be willing to separate from anyone or anything that can hinder you from finding the will of God for your life. And again, of course, we talked about in the story how his servant was the one, and it kind of proves that they don't necessarily mean they're bad people, because his servant was the one that suggested that he go and meet the preacher to find out what a donkey was. And not only did he was the one not only was he the one that suggested it, he was also the one that gave the money, because Saul didn't really have nothing. And the servant was like, well, man, I just got this quarter. I mean, this is not the exact amount, but it was a small amount. He's like, man, I got this a little bit of change in my pocket. Maybe we can take this to him and see what he say, kind of thing. And so he was the one that encouraged Saul to go to the preacher man. But yet, when it was time for him to get his assignment, the preacher man told him, hey, go send your servant on, and then me and you will talk. So again, number 22, be willing to separate from anyone or anything that can hinder you from finding your will of God for your life. So those were the, did I say that you have to be willing to remove the people, places, things out of your life that keep you from the will of God. And again, so that's how we ended chapter 9 last week, and we're going to start chapter 10 this week. And that was with the ending. So, and like I said, that was just a really quick review over the points we went over last week. So if you want to hear those points, or you want to hear how I elaborated on those points a little bit more, go back and watch the video from last week. It was Success in the Will of God part 6. So you can either go back and scroll on my Facebook page and find it, or you can go over to my YouTube page and find it, because it is downloaded on my YouTube page. I downloaded it last night. So with that being said, we're going to jump into chapter 10 tonight. I'm going to go ahead and pray, and then we're going to jump into the lesson. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, thank you so much for watching over us today. Thank you for blessing us and guiding us, giving us another opportunity to come here today to get into this lesson about your will, Lord. I know I've been on it for a few weeks, Lord, but it's because it's so important. Again, it's just as important as the second most important thing. Once we decide to trust you as Savior, it's just as important to decide that we're going to follow your will for our lives, Lord, because that's the only way we can truly have success. And of course, success that lasts. There's a difference in it. If they remember when we went through the intro, I talked about the difference between true success, which is, spiritual success, and what this world perceives as success. In other words, worldly success. There's a big difference. Worldly success look good, but it don't often last. Whereas true success not only it don't always look good, but it lasts and it has internal implications. So we thank you so much for watching over us. Thank you for putting this lesson on my heart. Thank you for letting your spirit come upon me, so and give me the wisdom I need to put these lessons together. So now, Lord, I ask as we go through this lesson tonight, you send your spirit down upon my heart. Give me the let my heart and mind be in the right place. Give me the guidance I need so I can bring these truths out that you have given us, these truths that contain your word here today. And I pray you send your spirit upon the hearts of whoever's watching the video, when they watch it live or they watching it later on at their own convenience. I pray you just let your spirit touch their heart as they read through, listen to these words and touch their hearts. And if they're doing something that if they're doing something they don't need to be doing, I pray you bring them on the conviction to stop it. And if they're not doing something they need to be doing, I pray you bring them on the conviction to do that thing that you have for them to do so they can follow your will for their lives, Lord. We ask that, as always, you guide this session. Give me the wisdom and the words I need to guide the people in the right direction. And I pray that we are all better Christians and have a close relationship with you after this session is over than we had before the session began, because your spirit showed up and showed us the way to do so. We love you and thank you for all you've done and given. And we say this prayer in your wonderful Son, Jesus' name. Amen. Man, I got chucked over there for a second. My throat did a little weird, dry cough thingy. All right. All right, so that was chapter 9. Like I said, we're actually gonna have a couple of references back to the beginning of chapter 9, but that's gonna come later on in the lesson. But tonight's lesson, we're gonna be in 1 Samuel chapter 10. We're making our way on through 1 Samuel chapter 10. So of course, always before we jump into it, something I always like to do, I always like to make this little disclaimer. I am a King James believer, believe wholeheartedly in the King James Bible. I believe it's the Holy Inspired Word of God. But my ministry is the Lost Sheep Ministries, aimed toward people, not necessarily everybody, you know what I'm saying, is this, but it is aimed toward people, my demographic, so to speak. It's for people that are hustlers, you know what I'm saying, people that's in and out of jail, people that really have a rough go at it, so they might not have finished up high school, or they might not have that close relationship with the Lord just yet. And it's a lot easier. It's sometimes, if you don't have that close relationship with the Lord just yet, or have the education, it's hard to understand the King James. So I read out the New Living Translation just to put it in regular English so everybody can understand what's being said, and they may be able to get the goodness of the words that's being spoken here tonight, so they can have that closer relationship with you. That's why I read out the New Living Translation. But I am a King James believer, not being a heretic. I always have to make sure people know that, because some people are serious about that King James Bible. You got to be King James only, and I understand it, but King James don't work for everybody. And I'd rather people get something than get nothing at all. Just deny it and get nothing at all. So with that being said, we're going to start over 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 1. The Lord tells us this. So again, you know, this is finishing up. I forget. I got to go back to tell you where we're at the story. So of course, Saul has no clue that the Lord is about to make him king of Israel. At this point, there has never been a king of Israel. There was this one guy that was kind of a king of a tribe, but they've never had a king of the whole nation of Israel before. And Saul don't realize that he's about to be made king. And all he's doing is what his dad did. Some donkeys lost. His daddy told him, take a servant and go find the donkeys. So all he's doing is following the will of his father. And because of that, he's going to end up coming across Samuel's path, and Samuel's going to anoint him as king. So that's where we're at right now. And he's just in the previous chapter, toward the end of chapter 9 that we finished last week, he finally came across Samuel. You know, he was coming to Samuel to ask Samuel where the donkeys was at that was missing. But again, he ended up talking to Samuel, and Samuel ended up telling him that, hey, you're going to be the king of Israel. And then today, we're going to look at today, once he tells him what he's going to do, what the will that God has for him, he's going to give him some things to do. He's going to tell him the thing to look for to show him, to prove to him that, hey, this is really is true. Because just like all of us, you know what I'm saying? We how do we know God really talked to us? You know, give us a sign, kind of like Gideon did. And that's what Saul didn't ask that, but Samuel is like, okay, here's these signs, these things are going to happen, and it's going to show you that you are in fact in the will of God, and God has called you to be king. So that's where we at. So he's already met Samuel. He's already had the conversation with Samuel. Samuel's already told him that, hey, you're going to be the hope of the nation of Israel. God is going to crown you king. So then, you know, saying they went to bed. So they talked, and they got up the next day. And before they would get ready to head back out to go home. That's when Samuel told Saul that God has chosen to be king. And now he's about to give him these instructions to let him know what to look for over the next few days to show him that, hey, the Lord has in fact called you to do this mighty work. So that's where we at. So that's gonna start off at 1 Samuel chapter 10 verse 1. So the Lord tells us this. He said, so then Samuel, in verse 1, it said, then Samuel took a flask of olive oil and poured it over Saul's head. He kissed Saul on the cheek and said, I am doing this because the Lord has appointed you to be the leader of his people, Israel. So again, so now he's actually being anointed, unofficially anointed as king. He's been officially anointed, unofficially anointed right here. He's been anointed by the Lord as Samuel, which is official, but it's going to be like official, like in front of the nation, later on in the chapter. And I think it's in chapter 11 when he gets anointed in front of everybody. But you notice what he said. He said, I'm doing this because the Lord has appointed you to be leader of his people, Israel. And he wanted to make sure he knew that the Lord is the one that chose him to do that. And the reason why that's significant, the reason why I want to put that out, because you notice if you remember, Samuel did not want to appoint him as king. Not that he had anything against Saul. He just didn't want to appoint a king at all, because up until this point, God had always been that king. So number 11 is this. I mean, number 1, in first point in chapter 10, which is number 1 for the night, and actually number 1 for the lesson in chapter 10 is this. It's something that this right here is going to help you to follow and follow God's will, and it's going to help you to stay in God's will. Because this right here, this is one of the things here, this point right here is one of the things I think that I say a majority of the people that's not willing to follow God's will, or a majority of the people that's not following God's will, is because of this thing right here. And it is this. And this is something you have to understand. Again, I'm teaching you how to have success in the will of God. I'm trying to teach you how to stay in the will of God. And I'm trying to teach you the mindset you need to have, and give you the mindset you need to have, and the things you need to know to be able to stay in the will of God. And this is a mindset you got to have if you're going to understand, if you're going to stay in the will of God. So number 1 for tonight's lesson is this. You have to understand that the Lord's will would not always be in agreement with your will. You have to understand, I'm going to read that again. You have to understand that the Lord's will would not always be in agreement with your will. And I think that is the thing that keeps a lot of people out of the will of God. I think there's a lot of things, because it just about honestly, the majority of the time, it's going to always go against your will. You know, because when the Lord wants you in his will, when the Lord got something for you to do, a lot of time what he does is take you out of your comfort zone. He send you to a place that you normally wouldn't go. And he have you doing things that you normally wouldn't do. It takes you out of your comfort zone. And it ain't just he's doing that just to show, hey, I'm God and I got power over you. He's doing that to show you the reason why you're out of your comfort zone. And he put you somewhere where you're uncomfortable at, because you really have no power there. That's not your area of expertise, so to speak. So if you go there and you follow God's will and you go there, you would know without a doubt that, hey, I was able to do this because of the grace of God. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. It wasn't my skill. Because if he keep you where you're comfortable at, and he keep you where you're familiar with, then you might think, oh, it's because I'm so familiar with this situation, because I'm so I know these people, I was able to will them to me. I know this area, that's why I was able to clean it up the way I was able to do. You might think it's because of you and your influence, but when he takes you somewhere where you have no clue where you're at, you have no clue about the people that you're dealing with, but yet you still be able to have success, then you know it's the power of God. That's what a lot of people don't understand. That's what God do in a lot of our lives. That's why a lot of times we can't understand, why is God taking me here? Why he got me doing this? Why he doing that? Because he's trying to show you that it's not you. It's not your ability that's going to determine whether you're successful or not. It's me being with you. That's why it says, I can do all things through Christ that strengthen me. He's trying to show you that, hey, you're able to do these things. You have this talent. You're able to do these things because of my strength, not your strength. Because us as humans, we always want to pat ourselves on the back. We always want to, say, look at the good job that we done. And that's what God, he eliminates that by taking you out of your comfort zone. See, he always take you out of your comfort zone and place you where you can, where you need to be according to his will, so you can be the greatest benefit for his kingdom. And that's what you got to understand. It might not be you being wherever it is that you're from. Might not be you being in the area that you always comfortable with, the area that you've always dwelled in. You know, and I've told y'all before the story of when I moved here. You know, when I first found out I had to move to Waverly, Tennessee. Had no freaking, never heard of it. And I've actually passed it millions of times because, how you doing, Miss Alicia? Glad you made it in. I hope you and that grandbaby doing good. I always praying for y'all. You know, of course, I've passed Waverly millions of times. I've passed it, you know, going back and forth because I lived in Memphis and I was going to school in Nashville. So I passed it, but I never stopped it. I had no clue where it was at. So when the Lord said, you know, when things started working out and I saw that I was going to have to move to Waverly, Tennessee, I'm like, man, what is going on? Then when I came up here and saw what Waverly, Tennessee was, I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing to me? Like, man, I was in Murfreesboro, you know, and we had hoped to, cause we really loved Murfreesboro. We had hoped to live there, and that's when we really kind of gelled together as a family. So, you know what I'm saying? Our plans were to stay in Murfreesboro, eventually get us some land and buy us a house in Murfreesboro. But see, that was our plan. So that's why when I found out that we had to move here, it was contrary to what I really wanted to do. Not only that, I had always been in cities. I'm sorry, y'all. I don't know what's on my throat right now. Being weird on me. But see, I had always lived in the city. Because you got to think about it. I went from living in Memphis, which is a huge city, to Nashville, which is a pretty big city, a huge city. And then Murfreesboro, it's not a huge city, but it's a city, nevertheless, to Waverly, which is straight country. I mean, country. It ain't even like it's all kind of country. Because Murfreesboro was kind of country, kind of city. This is straight country. You know, it ain't no city at all. So, you know, so I was definitely out of my comfort zone when I knew I was going to be out of my comfort zone when I found out I had to move here. But I knew this is what God was pulling me to. And I knew if I really wanted to be successful, then this is where I need to be. I had no clue. All I knew was I had a great job here. I would be making more money than I ever made. And at the time, I didn't have any job where I was at. So not only was I going to get a job, be able to get a job, it was going to be a job making more than I had ever made, putting me in a position that I never imagined having. So I knew it was definitely meant for me to be here. You know, I knew that without a doubt, but man, I did not want to come here. I was like, man, you couldn't find me nothing, Lord. You couldn't give me nothing in the Murfreesboro area, between Murfreesboro and Chattanooga, in that area where I can still stay in Murfreesboro. No, he wanted me here. You know, so again, it took me out of my comfort zone. And I remember me and my wife were talking about it, and I remember, you know, thinking about it. I was like, you know, I don't know why God is moving us here, but it must be something. And like I said, the only thing I knew was the job. I never imagined the work for God. And I've been here now a little bit over 9 years, and I never imagined the work for God that I would get accomplished because I moved here. See, because he took me out of my comfort zone, because he took me out of Murfreesboro, he put me in a position where I can benefit his kingdom the most. And see, I didn't see it. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why he was moving me. Why would you take me out of somewhere where I'm comfortable and I was doing what I thought was a good work? And now that I'm here and the work that I've done here is nothing compared to what I was doing in Murfreesboro is nothing compared to this. Because before I moved here, I had never led anybody to the Lord. Didn't even know how to. And I had never been soul winning before. Didn't even know how to. All that stuff that I'm always talking to y'all about, I'm always preaching to y'all about, you know, with the soul winning and all this stuff. Those are all things I started doing when I moved here. You know what I'm saying? So again, it took me out of my comfort zone, but he put me where I need to be so I could benefit his kingdom the most. And now since I moved here over these last years, I've only been here 9 years, been serving the Lord for 19, but only been here 9 years. And over these last 9 years, I've been able to lead over 500 people to the Lord. Why? Because I got out of my comfort zone. The Lord took me out of my comfort zone, and he knew that if he moved me here and I followed his will and went to where I wanted to go, then guess what? I will be able to be asset to his kingdom. So that's what the Lord does. That's why he takes you when you know, say you get to follow the Lord, you think you're gonna he's just gonna take me where I'm at and just make things better where I'm at. No, he might move you completely because it takes you out of your comfort zone. And again, I can only testify that it was the will of God, the power of God that gave me the ability to do these things. Because I'm the same person I was before I moved here, but I didn't do any of the things that I'm doing now. I have never preached a sermon in the church before until I moved here. Again, never been soul winning before until I moved here. Never told anybody how to get saved before until I moved here. All these things happened when I moved here. So God had to take me out of my comfort zone to show me his power and show me that the only way I'm able to do the things that I need to do is by following his will for my life. And that's a lot, and it's hard because again, I had to give up my will. We had to give up our dreams of having a house in Murfreesboro. Because like I said, we love Murfreesboro. But again, now 9 years later, again, I'm glad he did, because Murfreesboro then turned into, now that it's been expanding and a lot of people been moved in, it's getting pretty bad there too. So again, the Lord, he knew that. He knew that. We don't know that. So when the Lord is pulling you somewhere and he's guiding you somewhere, you might not understand it. You know what I'm saying? He's going to, and again, it's most likely 9 out of 10, it's going to be out of your comfort zone. It's not going to be somewhere you're comfortable at. It's not going to be somewhere that you have influence. It's not going to be somewhere that you have a certain amount of power. It's not going to be your own community where you can have influence. And he does to show you that, hey, you're only going to be successful if I'm with you. You're only going to be successful if you use my power. You're only going to be successful if you're working for me and through, you know what I'm saying, me working through you. That's where your success comes from. You know what I'm saying? But again, it's going to be out of your comfort. It's not going to always be going in line with your will. Like even me preaching. I know y'all see me on here and I get on here and I get fired up and I get to going and next thing you know it's 2 hours and I'm running my mouth. Y'all like, man, this dude, he loved this. This must be what he really loved to do. This must be a passion. It is now. But before I got called, man, I never wanted to be a preacher. It wasn't in my will to be a preacher. I remember going to church and when I was little, and I remember saying like, man, it would suck to be a preacher, because I remember, hearing the adults, how when the preacher brought a sermon or something, I remember hearing how people talked about him, saying behind his back. I remember, well, I can't believe he said that. I can't believe he did this. Saying anything he did that displayed him as a normal human being, saying it wasn't good enough. It's like he never was good enough for them. No matter how good he was, he never was good enough. I mean, you see that with Jesus. No matter how good Jesus was, he never was good enough for the people. The people still, even though he was perfect, lived a perfect life, the people still rejected him. So I'm like, why would I want that in my life? Why would I want to have people criticizing me and scrutinizing every move I make and I, I got things that I want to do and I can't do because I'm afraid with it. I didn't want that. I was like, man, it would suck. I used to think, man, it would suck to be a preacher. And now look at me, 19 years in, absolutely loving it. See, it wasn't my will, Me just living my life and making money and doing what I want to do, that was my will. But God's will was for me to bring, to come in and spread his word, come in and be a preacher, tell people how to get saved. What does it say? And I'm going to misquote it, but it said, how can they believe on whom they have not heard? And how can they hear, how can they believe on whom they've not heard? And how can they hear unless there's a preacher that preached the word? I'm misquoting this, y'all. I should have looked it up. And how can a preacher go without him being sent? And I misquoted that. You look it up for yourself. But I mean, basically, there is a lot of people that need to hear the word. And the only way they're going to hear the word if preachers go. So that's why he called me to preach, so I can go take the word. But it was to a specific group of people, the lost sheep. Lost sheep, the ones that's in and out of jail, the ones that's going through the struggles day in and day out. It's a lot of people that can go to the church, and willing to go to church to hear the word of God. But there's a lot of people that don't feel comfortable going to church because they feel like they're going to be judged. Maybe because they got tattoos all over their face and neck and all that stuff and all up and down their arms. And they feel like every time they go into the church, they getting judged. I know I talked to a young lady a couple of weeks ago that she was into homosexuality. And honestly, I think I told y'all about this. When I first walked up to her, I thought she was a boy. I was like, I was talking to her as a boy. She's like, I'm a girl. I was like, oh, my bad. I mean, she looked like a boy. Matter of fact, she was outside throwing around a football and had an arm on her, So I thought she was a boy, when I got to talk to her. And that's exactly what she said. She said, well, I don't go to church because I get judged kind of thing, because, the people can tell that, I got boy tendencies or whatnot, and I'm like, yeah, and I had to apologize. It was a weird, awkward situation, but she looked like a boy, and so she didn't want to go. So, but I was able to talk to her and lead her to the Lord, give the gospel to her. And even though she had been in church forever, she was still willing to accept the love. The matter of fact, as we was going through it, she was asking, like, how can I get saved? And I'm like, well, let me tell you. I'm like, you just asked the right question. I said, that's exactly what I'm here for. And I was able to tell her how to get saved. You see, so the Lord called me out, put me through all he put me through and called me into a place where I wouldn't be in my comfort zone so I can do the work that he had for me to do. See, and that's what the Lord does, because he shows you it's by his power that you're able to do these things. It's not about your own. Like I said, if I was staying where I was in Murfreesboro, I had to kind of build up a little reputation, and kids was listening to me, and they knew I was a man of God and everything, and they was listening to me and get advice. I got a young lady that's near and dear to my heart. She's getting ready to graduate from like nursing school her pretty soon. She was one that I gave advice several times, and she's been working her butt off, and she's changed her life around and doing really good things. So I had that influence there. So I'm like, Lord, why won't you let me stay there and continue to do this work? Because he wanted me to go somewhere else. Because he had another group of people that he wanted me to go to, his lost sheep. See, he took me out of my comfort zone. I didn't want to be a preacher, but he knew that these lost sheep needed somebody. They needed a preacher that's willing to go to where they at. A lot of people, like I said, a lot of preachers, they'll go into church and run a church all day, but you don't find too many that's going to go down in the projects. I was in the projects down in Jackson a couple of weeks ago. You ain't going to find too many down there just willing to walk around the project, knowing that at any moment something can pop off, you can get a shot. You go down there trying to preach the word. Even, matter of fact, one of my guys with me, and we were talking to people, and you can tell that nobody had really given them the gospel, because a lot of them, they just had no clue what the Bible really said. So you can tell. And the guy that was with me, the guy that I'm doing counseling with at the Hope Center, he said, "Man, that's sad." He said, because literally as we left out the place that we was at, it was literally like almost adjoined to them a church, and that church obviously hadn't been over there evangelizing, telling people about the word of God. And they was literally like right beside. It was like the apartments I was in, and then it was a street, just a little street. There's like a little corner store and the church. Right there. But these people, this church is right there in the neighborhood. It looked like a decent sized church too. And yet these people had no clue about the gospel and what they had to do to get saved. It's sad. And see, that's why the Lord called me to preach. You see what I'm saying? So again, I didn't want to preach. It wasn't against my will to preach. But the Lord knew that if I was to follow his will, if I was to give up my own will and follow his will, he knew the great work that I can do, and what I can do, all the things that I can do to benefit and build his kingdom. And that's why he brought me to Waverly, Tennessee, and that's why he called me to preach 19 years ago. And I just thank him that he gave me the wisdom to do so, to accept his will for my life. So you got to understand that. But again, in order to accept God's will for your life, and that was the whole point, that in order to accept God's will for your life, you got to give up your will. Because you notice again, he said, I'm doing this because the Lord appointed you. Samuel didn't want to appoint Saul as king. And again, it wasn't nothing against Saul. He didn't want to appoint a king at all. Because up until this point, the reason why there had been no king, because God was the king. Basically, the preachers were like, they weren't necessarily kings per se, but you can kind of look at them as they were the king. They were the governing body. They was the one that that kept people informed of the laws, and they was the one that guided the people in the direction that they need to go. And of course, if they was doing what they supposed to be doing, their guidance was given to them by the Lord. So the Lord lead them in a direction or give them the wisdom, and they shared that wisdom with the people. That's how I had been up until this point. So, and if y'all remember, if you go back into chapter 8, when they asked Samuel to get him a king, he got upset. To anoint them a king, he was upset about it. And that's why he was upset, because he realized that he knew they didn't realize what they were saying. They were saying that we want a human king, a worldly king. We don't want the spiritual king, the king of kings, God over us. So he was upset. So he didn't want to do it. And if you remember, the Lord told him, go ahead and do it. He said, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. So you see, again, even in this situation, it wasn't, Samuel did it, but it wasn't necessarily his will for them to give a king, for them to have a king, for him to anoint Saul as king. It wasn't his will. It actually went against his will, because he didn't want to know Saul king, but God wanted him to do so. So that's what you got to understand. The Lord's will would not always be in agreement with your will. It ain't going to happen. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I didn't want to be a preacher. But here I am. I don't want to come to Waverly, but here I am, and I'm glad I did. I'm glad I followed God's will for my life, because there's so many people that I've been able to help. There's so much work I've been able to do for the kingdom of God since I gave up my own will and followed his. And there's other great examples. If you look through the Bible, and some of the men that we look up to, if you're a Bible nerd like I am, some of the men we look up to, some of our favorite characters from the Bible, they was in the same situation. They didn't want to follow God's will for life. You think about Joseph. You think Joseph really wanted to go down to Egypt as a slave? You know what I'm saying? He was just trying to, you know what I'm saying, be with his brother. He wanted to be with his brothers. He wanted to be a part of the clique. But his brothers didn't like him, and they hated on him because he was dad's favorite. No, he the favorite. You know, they didn't like him. So they hated on him and sold him to slavery. You think he wanted to be a slave? But yet, you notice when he got down there and got in slavery in Potiphar's house, he didn't want to be there, but yeah, he like, well, this must be what God wanted to be. And you can tell now, he didn't necessarily say that he said, oh, well, this must be what God wanted me to be, but you can tell by his actions, because he got in there as a slave and he just worked his butt off and became the best slave ever. Matter of fact, if you read over there, it says that the work he did was so good that Potiphar actually put him in charge of his whole house. He said the only decision that Potiphar was making was what he was going to eat that day. He said he put Joseph in charge of everything. So it shows you that Joseph wasn't bitter about it. He wasn't upset about it. This is what God put me in. He just had to accept it. So he already accepted being a slave, and then what happened? Then here comes Potiphar's wife trying to get at Joseph, trying to hook up with Joseph. And Joseph, being the man of God he was, the nice, respectable young man he was, said, I can't do it. He said, my master's giving me everything, in control of everything except for you. I cannot do that. And then, of course, the woman kept pushing it. And one day, she ended up caught him by herself, caught him slipping, basically tried to rip his clothes off. And he ran out of his shirt, to get away from her. And then when her husband came home, what she did? Lied on him. Oh, man, you brought this Hebrew slave into here. And now he tried to embarrass me. What you going to do? And then show you, and if y'all pay attention, normally, that would have been a death. If Potiphar honestly thought that Joseph tried to hook up with his wife, he would have had him killed. You know what I'm saying? So the fact that he just threw him in prison shows you that he didn't really believe it. But of course, he had to save face. He couldn't, listen to a slave of his wife. It was more of a political thing. It's a political correctness thing. It wasn't the actual truth, and it shows you that he didn't believe it was the truth, because instead of having him killed, he threw him in prison. So now Joseph is a slave. He's a slave, and he's been a slave for a number of years. It was probably, it didn't really say specific time, but if you read the context, he was probably there 5, 6, 7 years, something like that, as a slave, and now he's a prisoner. You know what I'm saying? Somebody that's doing everything that he's supposed to be doing, following the will of God, and now he's a prisoner. So you think he really wanted to be in prison all those years? No, he didn't. But again, you can look at his actions and became the greatest prisoner there was. And to the point where the warden put him in charge of the prison. And it said the same thing it said about Potiphar. Said the warden got to a point where the only decision he had to make was what he was going to eat that night. So again, you know what I'm saying, following the will of God. And he kept on following the God's will, even though I can guarantee you he didn't want to be a slave. He didn't want to be basically abducted from his home. He did not want to be a slave. He did not want to be, a prisoner. But yet he followed God's will. God took him out of his comfort zone, and he just kept on following, trusting in the Lord. You never see him get bitter. You never even really see him mention it. He only mentioned once the fact that he had got abducted from home, and he was now a prisoner and a slave in his foreign land. He only mentioned that once the whole story. So it showed you he wasn't bitter about it, because he understood this is what God wanted him at. And because he was able to understand that, because he was able to give up his will to stay at home and be, his dad's favorite, and to follow God's will and come and be a slave and a prisoner, guess what ended up happening? Long story short, he ended up becoming the second most powerful man in the nation. And because of that, because he followed God's will, God gave him a dream and showed him that the land was about to go through some stuff. And if they didn't make some plans, they didn't start making some preparation and start doing some things, basically the world was going to die. And God gave this dream, this vision, this wisdom to Joseph, because Joseph was in his will. And of course, Joseph took to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh ended up putting him in charge of the whole nation. He ended up becoming the second most powerful man in the world. And because of that, not only did he save the known world at the time, he was also able to even save his own family, his brothers, the very ones that betrayed him. He was able to save them. And if you remember, if you go to the end of the story, when his brothers came up to him, what he told them, he said, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to do nothing to y'all, because even though y'all meant evil, God meant this for good. And he basically said, y'all did it, but y'all only did it because it was in God's will. It was God's will for me to be here so that I can save y'all. See, that's what I'm talking about. That's the attitude you got to have, and that's what you got to understand. If you're going to do God's will, 9 times out of 10, it's going to take you out of your comfort zone, and it's going to put you in a position, and it's definitely not going to be in alignment with your will. Like I said, Samuel didn't want to anoint Saul the king. Joseph didn't want to be a savior. I mean, you can go to so many other. I got a few of them wrote down, but I already took a few minutes on this. But you got to think about Moses. Moses didn't want to go to Pharaoh when the Lord told Moses, "Hey, go to Pharaoh. Let my people go." You know what I'm saying? Moses had left Egypt 40 years prior to that because he had killed somebody. He didn't want to have to go back and confront Pharaoh. But again, you know what I'm saying? And then I can't talk, Lord. I can't talk. You know, I got a thought. I can't talk. And that's what he told him, because he was making up excuses because he didn't want to go. But eventually he did give in to God's will, and look at the mighty miracles he was able to do in the name of God. Look at how he was able to glorify God. And after he finally accepted God's will for his life, by the time he left Egypt, they looked at him as a prophet. They looked at him. Matter of fact, the Egyptians thought he was a god, you know, because they believed in idols and stuff. But when the power that he displayed, because God was working through him, you know what I'm saying, it gave God glory, and he was able to free his people from the 400 years of slavery that they had been subjected to. Why? Because even though he was out of his comfort zone, he wasn't comfortable talking because he stuttered. He wasn't comfortable going and confronting Pharaoh. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't comfortable doing those things, but yet he did those things because there was God's will for him to do those things, and look what he's accomplished because of that. You know what I'm saying? Another one I got wrote down, Jonah. Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh. Y'all know the story. God said, "Hey, go to Nineveh, that wicked city Nineveh, and go preach to it." And what did Jonah? Matter of fact, me and my kids right now, we just did we are doing our Bible study this last week. We got into the book of Jonah. We're gonna be, finish it up this week. But you know what I'm saying? They said he went the opposite of what God wanted him to do. See, it wasn't in Jonah's will for him to go to Nineveh and preach to those people. It was in God's will for him to do, and he tried to run for him. Now, this is a situation where God forced him back because he sent the storm when he got on the ship, and sent the storm, and then the sailors ended up throwing him overboard, and he got stuck in that fish for 3 days. And then once he finally came to himself and realized there was no escaping the will of God, he went to the city of Nineveh. And when he went there, what happened? Once he finally accepted God's will for his life and got rid of his own will and accepted God's will, what happened? He went to Nineveh and preached. 120,000 people got saved. 120,000 people. It said even the animals got right with God. Of course, they didn't get saved, but it said they even put sackcloth on the animals. Even the animals got right with God. Everybody. And you got to think about it. It was 3 days and 3 nights that he had supposed to be in Nineveh already, and he didn't go because he was running away. Imagine how many people had died in those 3 days and 3 nights that didn't get saved because he wasn't following the will of God. And see, that's why it's so important. That's why I told y'all it's so important to understand the importance of the will of God. And we kind of talked about it last week, in a couple of last lessons. I can't remember. It was the week before lesson. It's somebody out there in this world that their salvation, their eternal security is based upon you following the will of God. And so there was all those people in Nineveh that didn't get saved because Jonah, for those 3 days, those people that died in those 3 days, because he was trying to do his own will instead of God's will. He didn't want to get outside his comfort zone. And you even see at the end, he was upset because God made him go to Nineveh and preach because everybody got saved. Because God told him to go to Nineveh and tell Nineveh is going to be destroyed. And of course, because everybody got saved, the Lord held off the destruction, and Jonah got upset about it. See, he wanted his own will. He didn't want the will of God. And we let that because of that. Because we always want to do what we want to do, and we want to go where we want to go, and we want to stay where we're comfortable. It a lot of time keeps us from being, a majority of the time, it keeps people from being in the will of God and doing the work that God has for them to do. One more, and this is a big one. You got to think about this. Paul. Think about Paul. Paul, the man that was probably the greatest missionary to ever live, wrote a majority of the New Testament. If you think about it, before God called him, he didn't want to be a Christian. He hated Christians. He absolutely hated Christians. I mean, that's what he was doing. He hated Christianity so much. He hated Jesus Christ. He hated the name of Jesus Christ so much that anybody that spoke that name, anybody that believed in the name, he was throwing them in prison or torturing them to death. I don't care who you want, man, woman, children. He was torturing people to death. He was torturing Christians to death because he hated Christians that much. He didn't want to. You think he wanted to be a Christian? Somebody that hated Christian that much that he was going from city to city. Matter of fact, when he got called, he was on his way to Damascus to go and harass some Christians and then bring them back in chains. He hated it. He didn't want to be a Christian. That wasn't a part of his will. But guess what? The Lord called him. You know what I'm saying? He had to see the light, literally. You know, it would end up being blind for 3 days. But then once he finally accepted God's will for his life, what happened? Again, the most phenomenal soul winner, that one of the most phenomenal soul winners of the Bible, one of the most phenomenal missionaries probably ever. Most of the churches in the world, as a matter of fact, the reason why we have the gospel of the day is because of the work that Paul did. Because if you're not an Israelite, you're considered a Gentile. And Paul was the first one that really went to the Gentiles and started preaching to the Gentiles. So because of his preaching, that we were able to get this gospel. So you got to understand that. See, at first he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to be a Christian. He didn't want to go out there and preach the word of God. You know what I'm saying? And honestly, if you think about it, if you look at his life, there's probably good reason because, man, he did some suffering. Paul went through some stuff, man. Paul got beat basically everywhere he went. He got thrown in jail everywhere he went. He got shipwrecked 2 or 3 times. I mean, got bit by a snake. I mean, Paul went through some stuff to be a Christian. But even though he did and went through those things, even though he suffered the way he did, he still accepted the will of God. And because to this day, I was talking to y'all earlier about the 500 plus people that I made lead to the Lord. I led them to the Lord using his doctrine, using his words, using Paul's words, the Romans road. If anybody knows soul winner, you know the Romans road. That's what I use. I use the words that Paul had. Now imagine had Paul not accepted the will of God. He just wanted to continue to follow his will and just continue to kill Christians that have become a Christian. We probably wouldn't be Christian today. This probably wouldn't be a Christian nation today. The word of God might have never got out the way it did. See, so it's very important. And even with this story, we look at this guy Saul, who's about to be, who just got anointed as king. If once we get to the end of chapter 11, no, matter of fact, the end of chapter 10, the second half of chapter 10, we're gonna see Saul didn't want to be king. He didn't want to be king. Matter of fact, when it was time for them to anoint him officially, like right now, Samuel's anointing him just kind of, God has chosen you kind of thing. But when it was time for him to get anointed in front of the whole nation and officially make him king, they had to go find him. He was hiding. He didn't want to be king. He was scared. You see what I'm saying? So my whole point is this is, you got to understand, if you're going to follow the will of God and you're going to stay in the will of God, you got to understand you got to lose your own will. You got to lose your own will. As long as you're trying to fight for your will, as long as you're trying to fight for your right to party, so to speak, as long as you're trying to fight and constantly rebelling and constantly trying to do what you want to do instead of doing what God calling you to do, you're never going to truly be able to be successful. If you truly want to be able to be successful, you're gonna have to give up your will. You're gonna have to move to Waverly. You're gonna have to leave Murfreesboro and move to Waverly like I did. You're going to have to go from being a city boy your whole life to being a country boy like I did. And you can probably hear it in my voice. I'm pretty sure, because I don't hear it. When I first got here, that accent was thick. I was like, oh my gosh, these people are country. And I don't even hear it no more. And it's probably because I done became country. And I remember hanging out with some friend of mine. They said, man, you done got country. Like, I can't help it. That's what I'm around all the day. You know what I'm saying? But again, if you want to do the will of God, if you're serious about it, you're going to have to lose your will. You're going to have to understand, because 9 times 10, like I said, number one, you got to understand that the Lord's will would not always be in agreement with your will. 9 times out of 10, he's going to take you somewhere that you're not comfortable with. You're going to take you somewhere that you're not used to being. He's going to have you doing things that you're not used to doing. He's going to have you talking to people that you're not used to talking to, so you can see that it's his power and his ability that you're able to accomplish anything. You know what I'm saying? It's through his power, his ability, his spirit working through you, not your own power, not your own influence. That's why he takes us out of our comfort zone so we can see him. Because he put us somewhere where we can't depend on ourselves. We can only depend on him being with us. And that's why he always takes us out. His will is always contrary to our will, because he want to show you that his will is the best way. So number one, again, if you're going to follow the will of God, I know I went a little long on that one, but like I said, and the reason why I went long on that one, because it's important. Like I said, one of the main reasons most people are not willing to follow the will of God is because God will always, it will not always be in agreement with their will. If they do God's will, then they got to stop doing their will. If they do God's will, they got to stop doing whatever it is they're doing. They got to stop, chasing the women or chasing the men or doing the drugs or drinking the alcohol or going to the club. If they're going to do God's will, it's going to go against their will. And that's why 9 times 10, most people don't follow the will of God, because it goes against their will. So number two is this. So you read the next verse. Now, next verse is actually I'm reading majority of this little section here, and it's going to actually be 2 points that's going to come out of this. So in verse 2 it says, "Now when you leave me today, you will see 2 men beside Rachel's tomb at Zilzah on the border of Benjamin. They will tell you that the donkeys have been found and that your father's worried about you and is asking, have you seen my son? Now, when you get to the oak of Tabor, you will see 3 men coming towards you who are on their way to worship God at Bethel. One will be bringing 3 young goats. Another will have 3 loaves of bread, and the third will be carrying a skin of wine. They will greet you and offer you 2 of the loaves, which you are to accept. Now, when you arrive at Geba of God, where the garrison of the Philistines is located, you will meet a band of prophets coming down from the altar on the hill. They will be playing a harp, a tambourine, and a flute, and a lyre, and they will be prophesying. At that time, the Spirit of the Lord will come upon you with power, and you will prophesy with them, and you will be changed into a different person." So I want to read all that. Like I said, it's 2 different points going to come out of that. First of all, you notice that's pretty detailed. Those are pretty good details of what's about to happen, the next coming events that's about to happen. That's pretty, he told them specifically, you're going to meet this specific person. They're going to have these specific things. They're going to tell you these specific things. They're going to give you these specific things. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty detailed. And why is he doing it? He's trying to show them, Saul, that you really did get called. Like I said, Saul didn't necessarily ask him to do it, but he's doing it anyway, show him like, yes, you did just have, God really has called you to do this work. So number 2 is this. Like I said, this is going to be point number 2 and number 3. Number 2 is this. When you wholeheartedly follow his will, he will confirm your path. When you make that decision that you're going to follow the will of God, he's going to confirm your path. He's going to do things. There's going to be little coincidences that's going to pop up that is going to show you that, hey, you're following his will. That happens to me all the time. I'm always just happen to be somewhere doing something and run into somebody I ain't seen in like 20 years or something like that. You know what I'm saying? He always do things to confirm that you are on the right path. There's a little coincidence. And that's what he was doing with Saul. He's like, now, when you start leaving back, just go your regular way. But I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you that you're on the right path. I'm going to show you that you really did just get called. I'm going to show you that I really have this work for you to do. You know what I'm saying? When you have these little close calls in your life, I remember when I was living, outside the will of God, I would always have little close calls. And it would be God, it's like God showing me like, hey, this thing could have been a lot worse, but you need to get back to me. You see what I'm saying? He always had these little close calls, these little things that they were showing me that I need to stop doing the things that I was doing. And if you're in tune with God, you're like, oh man, that was a close call. Let me give that thing up. Let me not do that thing. But if you're not, if you're still just content on doing your will, you're not going to see it. But he's always going to throw little things in your path to show you that, hey, I'm with you. You know what I'm saying? I remember talking about the whole Waverly thing. I got these things, and the reason why I know this, because like I've lived by it, I got these things what I call the big 3. It was 3 things. I was just telling y'all how I didn't want to come to Waverly in the first place, and didn't want to come to Waverly. Other than that, I didn't want to come to Waverly, but I knew the Lord was leading us in this direction. I knew there was something for me to do here. I knew this is the move we had to make. I can't tell you why I knew. Well, I know what it was. The Spirit was leading me, but I just knew this is where I need to be at. So again, of course, there was a lot of doubt. Like, am I really in the right place? My Lord, is Waverly. I don't know. I'm country, and it was so much doubt. But then it was these 3 things, and it happened over a period of time. But there was 3 things I like to call the big 3 that the Lord did to show me, kind of like what He's doing with Saul here. It was 3 major things that He did to show me that I was on the right path. One of them, and I'm pretty sure I've shared this story with y'all before, so if y'all heard it before, I apologize, but it just goes along with the lesson. One of the things He did was, so we was living in Murfreesboro. The school we was going to was like it was Oakland High School. If you know anything about football in Tennessee, Oakland like one of the top schools. You know, they the one they're 6A, so they're one of the biggest schools, and they win the championship like every other year. You know, they won the state championship a few times. So the year that my son was a junior the year we moved here. So his junior year, I think they went like 12-1. They lost like the third round. They didn't lose any during the season. And I think they lost like the third round of the playoffs or something like that. I mean, they was predicted, because they didn't lose. They lost some seniors, but a lot of their key players like juniors and sophomore, which my son was one of them. So they was predicted to win the state the next year. So that's we thinking like, oh, my son will get to be on I mean, it was such a good football school that, Alabama and, the big LSU and all the big SEC schools will recruit at that school. That's how big they were in football. So that's where we were at. So again, halfway through my son, this is like January, February, we found out that we got to move. It was January of my son's junior year. So that's like the second half of his junior year. We found out we got to move to Waverly, Tennessee. So I come up here, and part of my interview, when I was doing my interview, I was talking to the lady, the secretary, who just happened to be like the booster for the football club. And she's really, her son playing football, she was big into the football program here. So we just happened to be talking, and it came up, football came up while we was talking. And, when I brought up football here, and I was telling like, oh yeah, my boy, and I was telling like my boy played for, Oakland, her eyes got big and, everything. And I'm like, yeah, he's going to be a starter next year, blah, blah, blah. And I could tell her eyes getting big. So I'm like, man, and I'm all excited. I'm like, how about football here? Like what the high school look like? And when I said that, she just dropped her head. And she like, man, she said we was 1, I think it was 1-9. The year before we moved here, they was 1-9. She said we were 1-9 last year. She said we haven't been to the playoffs since 2008. This was 2014. So it had been like 6 years since they had been in the playoffs. And I think they hadn't even won a playoff game since like 1988. I mean, it was like 30 years since they had won a playoff game. So we went from basically my son was about to go from being at the best school in football to one of the worst schools in football. You know what I'm saying? So I had to go tell my son this. And I remember having a conversation, man. He was upset. He like, Dad, I want to go to college, play football. Like, man, this is going to kill me. Nobody going to see me here, blah, blah. But I remember telling like, son, I said, I don't want to go to this town any more than you do. I'm going to have to make new friends. And I'm going to be uncomfortable. It's going to take us out of our comfort zone. I said, but I really feel, he was like, man, why don't you just let me stay with one of my friends? And, and I'll move up there after my senior year. And I'm like, no, I believe we all need to go. And I believe that if we go and we follow God's will for our life, he's going to work it out. I said, that's what I told him. And I ended up having a problem with the phone, but we ended up moving. And needless to say, we got here. We moved here in February, and in March, the very next month, like a few weeks after we moved here, we got word that the coach was retiring, that the coach they had was retiring, and they was hiring a new coach. So they hired a new coach a few weeks after we moved here, and the new coach came in, completely revamped the program. And my son's senior year, his first year, and this is rare for a coach. If you know anything about football and coaching, it usually take you a year or two to kind of get the program where you want to. My son's senior year, which was this coach's very first year, they went 9-3. They lost 9-2. They won 9 games. They only lost 1 game through the season, and then they lost. It was 10-2 because they lost 1 game in the season, and then they lost the second round of the playoffs, I believe. But anyway, it goes. They went 10-2, and I believe I'm right somewhere in there, 10-2. And they won the first playoff game they won in 30 years. The very first year, this new coach coming in, they go 10-2, and then every year since then, and of course, I got 3 boys that play football, and for 5 years straight, 6 years straight, I had a son on the team every single year, and for 6 years straight, 5 years straight, I had a son on the team every year for 5 years straight. We was after that first year, we was second in our region. And after that first year, we was number 1 in the region for 5 years straight. Why? Because we followed the will of God. You know what I'm saying? God showed me. He put us in a place where we can be successful. Not only for his kingdom, you know what I'm saying? Of course, I know the work got started over those 5 years, but we was not only successful in his kingdom, he gave us success as well. He knew what was coming. He knew he was bringing that new coach in. He knew this town was about to have this big turnaround, and we got to be a part of it. Why? Because we follow his will. Another thing he did, that was just one of them, and then I can go on and on. Another thing he did, At the time, the bank I had was First Tennessee Bank. And again, this is a small town. You don't often get business move in and out. Like the businesses that here are here. And once in a while, something new will pop up. But for the most part, especially something big as a bank, that's it. So they didn't have I will know in First Tennessee, in Murfreesboro, they got First Tennessees all over, but they didn't have a First Tennessee here in Waverly. So, so the closest one was in Nashville, which is about an hour and 15 minutes away. So anytime I wanted, now of course you got online banking, but anytime I need to actually go to the bank to deposit a check or something, I had to drive all the way down to Nashville to do so. So I did it for the first few months. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And then it got to a point where in order for me to get to the bank, I would have to leave work early. And if traffic was bad, I would still not make it to the bank. So I remember this one day I had got down there and I literally walked in the door as the security guard was coming up to lock the doors. So I walked in the door as he was coming up to lock the doors. And I remember that, and I remember and I went to the lady and I would talk to the lady to tell her, and it was a Friday too. So, I'm holding people up because I snuck in there right before they locked the doors. And I remember I was talking to the lady, the manager was beside the teller that I was at, and the manager was beside her. They was, doing the end of stuff, counting on the money or whatever. And so I'm talking to the teller. I was like, man, I'm sorry. I know I'm holding you up on a Friday. I said, but I had to get here today. I need to get this money deposited or whatever it was. I said, man, honestly, I was like, I love this account. I've had this account for years. One of my first bank accounts. I said, but I might have to close it. And she's like, why? I was like, because I said, I live in Waverly, Tennessee, and it's just too far to just drive all the way down here just to put a check in the bank. So I'm talking to this tailor, and when I said that, the manager eyes perk up. She's like, well, sir, if you can be a little bit more patient, you might not have to do that. I'm like, why you say that? She said, we are right now in a process, because in Waverly, they had a Bank of America that was there. They said, and that's what I said. I said, I might just go ahead and switch my account to Bank of America, because that's what's in Waverly. And when I said that, she said, if you be a little patient with us, you won't have to do that. Like, what do you mean? She said, we are right now in the process of buying that Bank of America, and we're going to buy that Bank of America and turn it into a First Tennessee Bank. And I'll be darned, y'all, not even 4 months after we moved up here, it went from being a Bank of America to a First Tennessee Bank. Again, I'm not saying God made that happen for me specifically, but again, I followed his will, and he not only put me in a position where I can do the best for his kingdom, but he also put me in a position where I can be successful myself. He made that happen. I needed a bank, a First of America. It was one there. You know what I'm saying? Like little thing like that. And like I said, it might seem like a coincidence, but I know that's God taking care of me. I followed his will, so he helped me out. I needed a Bank of a First Tennessee Bank there, so I went to drive all the way down to Nashville. Guess what? It's a First Tennessee Bank. And the other one I called, like I said, it was 3 of them. So another thing is, my company, when I started at this company, it was called Rockwood Lithium. And it was based out of Germany. I mean, it was a German company, like it was the stockholders and all that. I don't know all the stock stuff, but it was basically a German company. And my relationship with God is so serious that I was hesitant about taking a position, because I remember at one point the whole German Nazi and what they did to the Jews kind of thing. I know at one point they was the enemies of God's people. So I was like, man, Lord, I don't work for somebody that you consider your enemy kind of thing. And, and again, the Lord, he just gave me, when I prayed on, he gave me a peace about it. And he was basically like, go ahead and I'm going to take care of it. So I ended up accepting the position. Now, the position I'm in, I started in January, and it takes about 4 months to do complete training before you can work on your own in the lab that I was working in. So it was about my 3rd month of training. We get a memo that, hey, we just been purchased by another company called Albemarle, which is what it is now, which is an American company. So within 3 months of me being there, I was no longer working for the German. And it was they took, for the actual happening, it took like a whole year, but they started the process 3 months before my training was even up. We got word that it was no longer be a German company, because it bothered me. And it ain't like there's something that just happened. It was a $6 billion transaction. This wasn't a small feat. And this facility has places all over the world. So they had to get cooperation from basically all over the world for this to happen. And yet it happened before I was even done with my training. So again, those are just some examples that I have of things that has happened that God has shown me that I was on the right path. Because it's hard, you always, especially if you're serious about doing the will of God, you want to know, like, Lord, am I really on the right path? Am I really doing what you would have me to do? Am I really doing what's going to benefit your kingdom most? If your heart desire is truly to follow his will. And he'll do little stuff. That's what he was doing with Saul. He was showing Saul that, hey, I'm putting you on this path. I've called you to do this thing. And I'm showing you that you're on the right path. I have this theory. I call it my penny theory. Sometimes when I want to find out if I'm really in the will of God, I call it the penny theory. I started noticing after I gave my life to God, and it probably was there the whole time, but I really just started noticing it after I gave my life to God. I would see pennies. I would see randomly, and y'all probably see it too. And if you don't, you'll probably start seeing it now because I'm bringing it up. But I would see pennies in just random places. And I started noticing on the days when I was scrambling around, when the day didn't quite go like I thought it should go, or I didn't quite end up where I thought I should be or where I had planned on being. Sometimes I would get, at some point during the day, I would be somewhere and I would find a penny. It might be, you know what I'm saying, I'm running behind somewhere and I pull up into a parking lot and I open my door up and there's a penny right there. So I called it my penny theory. I always looked at it like it was like God leaving breadcrumbs for me. And the reason why I say God was leaving it for me, because a penny is a blessing. It's the smallest amount of money there is in America. But if you get enough pennies, you can get a lot of money. I mean, it's still a blessing nonetheless. But a lot of us look over that blessing because it's just a small blessing. It's just a penny. Who cares? But me, I pick them up. And I always noticed that whenever I was having, like I said, a crazy day or some craziness happened, or maybe I'm in a bad mood or something, I would go somewhere and bam, there'd be a penny right there. And it was like, you know, it just kind of confirmed like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Matter of fact, I was out soul winning this weekend and we didn't end up getting to see anybody saved, but I found like 6 pennies. So to me, I'm like, man, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. What am I right or wrong? I don't know. I don't know if God leaving pennies around for me, but that was just my little penny theory, my little thing to keep myself confident. Like, hey, you are exactly where you're supposed to be at. So again, so I can understand the doubt. I can understand wanting to know. And we saw with Gideon, when God called Gideon to be the leader of Israel. What did Gideon say? All right, well, if you really want to do it, you have to prove it to me. You know, make the fleece wet and the floor around to be dry. And then the Lord did that. Then the next day he was like, well, make the floor dry, wet and the fleece to be dry. You know, he wanted that confirmation. And sometimes, you know, God, and of course, God did it for Gideon, and Gideon ended up being a great warrior for the Lord. And sometimes it's just right up front. You can't deny it. But sometimes little subtle things, like I said, little coincidences that happen, that just happen to happen, shows you that you was on the right path. I mean, I look at the way me and my wife ended up coming together. I was working at Taco Bell, you know what I'm saying, working with her brother. And we were just like joking. We used to be terrible because we worked at Taco Bell. You know how it is. You working fast. If you ever work in fast food, you know we're horrible. So we would talk about each other, moms and things like that. And I remember I found out that he was Mexican. And at the time, J-Lo was out, so I was real big on like Spanish. I was like, man, I want me a Spanish chick. So when I found out he was Mexican, I was like, oh man, don't you got a sister or something that you can hook me up with, kind of messing with him, kind of thing, you know? And we used to joke like that all the time. And then one night we were just joking around, and I said something about his sister. And right when I said that, his phone rung. And it turns out it was Rez, my wife, but it was his sister calling. And he had already told me, like, yeah, I do got a sister, you know what I'm saying, that's single or whatever. So she was calling. So we was already talking crap, and I was talking about, like, what I do to your sister, blah, blah, blah. So he was like, well, if you so big and bad, here you go. And he just threw me the phone. You know, he just threw me the phone, like, no, what you gonna do kind of thing. And me and her ended up talking. The first time we met didn't go good, but a few months later we met again, and we actually, you know, talked for like 2-3 days, and then like 3-4 days later we went out, and we basically been together ever since. That was August of 2000. Matter of fact, it was August the 3rd, 2000, August the 3rd, 2000. We went out on a date, just like I said, randomly just brought up his sister called. We went out on a date, and now we've been together since August of 2000. So we've been together for almost 23 years, and we've been married for 19 of those 23. Just a little coincidence. I know our marriage was meant to happen. Another situation, I was out knocking on doors one day and soul winning, and I think I told y'all this story before, just out knocking on doors, wasn't really sure if it was the area I was supposed to be in, because I always want the Lord to guide me, and sometimes it's sure like, hey, you need to go here, sometimes it ain't. And this was one of those days I wasn't really sure, but something just said like, well, I'm just gonna go to this area because I hadn't been there in a while. And I went and I started knocking on doors, and right as I knocked on this one door, and this young lady came out crying. She was crying. And I'm like, man, you know, trying to talk to her, console her, see what's going on. And she was basically in a situation where she was getting ready to get kicked out of her house kind of thing, and she didn't know what she was going to do, you know. And she said, you know, and I was like, well, I'm here. My name's John Stewart. I'm from the church, and I'm out telling people about the Lord. And she said, literally, now in tears, she said, when you knocked on my door, I was literally praying to God and asking for God to give me a sign that he's still with me, that he's with me and he's going to help me out of this situation. She said, literally, I had literally just said that. And right as I said that, you knocked on my door. See, God was showing. That wasn't no coincidence. That was God showing. I wasn't really sure if I was in the right area or not, but God showed me that I was. And that young lady, it turns out she wasn't even saved. And I told her, I said, I know you got this apartment thing going on. I said, but there's another issue you got that's way more important than this, and it's your salvation. And like, if you're willing to let me, I'll go over, you know what I'm saying, the gospel with you. And I end up being able to lead that young lady to the Lord. You see, God showed me, even though I was really uncertain if I was on the right path where I was supposed to be, he showed me in that situation that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Because the young lady was praying for the Lord to send somebody to her to talk to her. And right as she started praying that, I showed up talking about Jesus Christ. You see what I'm saying? God would do those little things. And I had this other one. This wasn't in here originally when I put this letter together, but this actually just happened to me this week. Y'all, bless my heart. So about 4 weeks ago, something else I do, part of my ministry, I do drug rehab counseling. Y'all probably heard me mention that before. And so, the whole part of, if you're going to get rid of an addiction, or you're going to get, you know what I'm saying, on the path of God, it's all about having a closer relationship. The closer you are to God, the less likely you are to do something you're not supposed to be doing. So that's when I'm counseling my guys, that's basically what I'm trying to do, help them build a relationship with God. So something that I've told them is, I like, the best way to build your relationship with God is telling other people about God. I like, there's nothing that's going to help you build a relationship quicker than going out soul winning and telling people about the Lord. So for the last 2 guys I've taken them soul winning. So the guy that I'm currently with, I started taking him soul winning with me about 4 weeks ago. It was about 4 weeks. Matter of fact, it was on April the 1st. So it was about 3 weeks ago. So April the 1st was the first day me and him went out. So we went out soul winning, went to this little project area, kind of close to where we was at. So it's one of those, like, man, we talked to a couple of people. Most of the people we talked to was already saved, or nobody didn't come to the door. So I was kind of like, man, I wonder, am I in the right area, you know? So we ended up knocking on this door. And this older lady came to the door, and she was like 86. I mean, she's old. Like, you can tell she was old, and she was like 86 years old. So we got to talk to her, and asking her, if she knew if she gonna go to heaven, and she was just in tears. She's like, no, I don't know. She's like, I really want to go to heaven. I know I got family that's gonna be there. And she said, I know I've been to church my whole life, but I honestly can't tell you if I've ever been saved or not. And she said, my mind is kind of going, so I really don't know. I can't say. And I said, well, ma'am, I said, why don't we go ahead and make sure today? I said, well, how about I can just stand here and share this gospel? And, of course, I'm a big, ugly black dude. And I had this other guy with me that's, you can tell that he did drugs before. You know what I'm saying? He was, because like I said, he was in recovery. He had only been like 3 months clean. So, you know what I'm saying? So she was scared to open her screen door. And I said, you don't have to. I said, we can just stand right here and I'll talk to you through your screen door. So we talked to her. And like I said, she was really old. You can kind of tell her mind was slipping. I was trying to talk, ask her, whenever I share the gospel with somebody, I like to ask them questions to make sure they understand. And she was getting confused. She was easily confused. So I really kind of had to talk to her like I would a child, like if I was talking to like a little kid. But I got through it. And at the end of it, I asked her would she like to, accept Jesus as Savior. And again, she was like, oh, I want to so bad. I really do want to get saved. I want to make sure I go to heaven. I said, well, ma'am, you really want to make that decision, pray the sinner's prayer with me. And I did. So we went through the process. She prayed the prayer. And then I remember after, she's like, oh, thank you so much for coming by and saving me. And I'm like, ma'am, I did not save you. I said, I don't have the power to save anybody. I said, all I did was told you about the one who could, which was Jesus Christ. And she's like, oh, I'm so thankful. So we left and didn't think none of it. Matter of fact, when we left, the guy, because this was his first time going out, and like I said, with the way her mind was slipping, because she was saying, like, sometimes I have a hard time remembering things, and she was getting confused on some of the questions that I don't want her to be confused. I don't want to confuse nobody. I'm not trying to sneak Jesus in on nobody. So I slowed it down, and I did what I could to make sure she understood. And at the end, she was just like, I want this, So he asked me, he's like, man, you think she really got saved? And I said, man, I don't know. I said, I really don't know. I said, I did my part. I did my best to keep it as simple as possible. That's between her and the Lord. And we left, and that was the only person that we got to share the gospel with that day. So again, wasn't sure if I went to the right area, because the one person we did share the gospel with don't even know if she was mentally, competent enough to really understand what was said. So we left and think none of it. So this week, this past Tuesday, my preacher called me, and that was last Tuesday actually. My preacher called me. And you know what I'm saying? Normally that's the day I do my Lost Sheep ministry. So normally he calls to make sure I'm still gonna come through so he can have the bus and stuff ready. And he calls me, he like, do you remember I can't remember her last name, but her first name was Virginia. And I had to think about it like, because I go sewing every, so I come across a lot of people. And he said, Hunter. I was like, oh yeah. I said, it's a little old lady that we talked to a few weeks ago. I'm like, why? And I thought he would say like she died or something. But turns out 3 days after we left, because like I said, me and this guy, we thought maybe she wasn't mentally competent. Did she really get it? 3 days after we left, she was so thankful that we came by to talk to her that she wrote a letter, and she sent the letter to the church. So she sent the letter to the church saying that thank you two guys for coming by and saving me. You know, I'm 86 and this is something I've been needing to do my whole life, and God must have knew it was time. And she was basically like, I don't know how much time I got left. My health has been failing. She said, but I can say since I talked to y'all the other day, because the letter was dated the 4th. So this was 3 days later. She said, since I talked to y'all the other day, everything seemed to be going better for me. And I've been soul winning for almost 9 years now. First time, well, 8 years, and it's the first time I've ever got somebody, call or send a letter thanking me. So it really blessed my heart. But at the same time, my point is show we was exactly where we're supposed to be. So when you give your heart to following the will of God, he will show you. Like, there will be things that will happen, like I said, maybe little coincidences, little close calls, but there's going to be things that he's going to allow to happen to show you that, hey, you are on the right path, keep going kind of thing. It's not always apparent. Like I said, I've been soul winning 8 years. That was the first time I've ever got a letter from someone about it, thanking us for coming by. But it touched their heart. And like I said, we didn't know. Like I told my guy, like, I ain't gonna lie to you, man. I couldn't swear she was saved or not. I said, all I know is we did our part. She, she did her part. Now that's between her and the Lord. But of course, like I said, because we thought her mind was gone and we didn't really know. But she remembered it. And it affected her so much that 3 days later, she wrote the letter. And I actually got the letter last week. So it was 3 weeks later when I got the letter. So, I mean, she was cognizant enough to where, and it was competent enough to where she remembered, and it had such an effect on her that she felt that she needed to write us and thank us. You see what I'm saying? So you never know. But sometimes little things like this happen. God will show you you're on the right path. And that really encouraged me. And I told the guy, I said, see, as a matter of fact, I gave him the letter. So I could have read it for you guys tonight, but I gave it to him to remind him, because like I said, he's in recovery. He's on the 3 months clean. And I said, man, whenever you had those tough times, pull this letter out and read it. And it'll remind you why you need to have a close relationship with the Lord. And I gave it to him. But again, my whole point was, when you wholeheartedly follow his will, he will confirm your path. We weren't sure, like I said, we really didn't have good luck that day. Matter of fact, they called the police on the guy that was with me because this lady was having a problem with her son, and apparently he looked like her son, and she thought that it was her son harassing her, so she called the police on her. It was a crazy day, and like I said, we didn't really know if anybody had saved, so we wasn't sure. But then I got that letter last week, and it showed me that we on April 1st, when we went out to hundreds and knocking on doors, we was exactly where we were supposed to be, we was exactly where we need to be, and to be in God's will. And again, it ain't gonna always be apparent, but it does happen every now and again. But the thing is, though, if you're not in tune with God, if you're not trying to live by God's will, if you're not looking to see if you're really in his will, then it's not going to be apparent to you. Even if he show you and it's obvious, it's not going to be apparent to you. I've had that happen before. I remember this one time I was down in Dixon. Now, Dixon's about 45 minutes away from where I stay at. So I was going, but it's a bigger city, so I like to go to big cities. So I was down there knocking on doors, and came across this young lady, talking to her. She wasn't saved. So, and she was just talking about, the hypocrisy in the church, and she had all of her excuses and everything. And then I got to kind of share, I can't remember what prompted it, but I started sharing my testimony with her. And a part of my testimony is, if y'all heard my testimony before, when I talk about the guy that, I was kind of selling drugs with, and he was actually planning on robbing me and killing me. So I'm talking about this guy, and I say his name, and her eyes perk up. She's like, no, his name, we call him Man, but his real name was like Mandricus Darden. And she's like, Mandricus Darden from Springfield? Like, yeah. I'm like, how do you know him? She said, because I'm from Springfield. So here I am, a guy from Waverly, Tennessee, knocking on doors in Dixon. She's from Springfield, Tennessee, and just happened to be at this place in Dixon. And it wasn't even her place. She was visiting somebody. And we know the exact same person. And I just happened to bring up this person because he's in my testimony. I don't see how I can get even any more obvious than that. You know, so I was telling her, like, young lady, obviously the Lord has something for you to do. The Lord's, you know what I'm saying, this is the day the Lord has put in for you to get saved. You know, would you like to hear the gospel get saved? And don't y'all know she still didn't want to get saved? She said, well, I ain't sure about that. She said, no, I said, what is there not to be sure about? She said, well, no, God got to save me, give me a sign. I'm like, lady, I live 45 minutes from here. I said, I'm not even from here originally. I said, you live like an hour or something away from here, and you visiting, and I just happened to come across you and talking about God and mention somebody that we both knew. Matter of fact, the guy that I'm talking about, he ended up dying, and she was hanging out. She was telling me how she was hanging out with him the day before he died. How can it can't be no more obvious than that to me? But to somebody that's not really in tune with God, somebody that's not want to give into the will of God, somebody that's not want to follow the path of God, it's easy for them to say, that's just a coincidence. You're saying, I don't believe in coincidences at all. When you somewhere and you where you're supposed to be and something like that, a coincidence happen, I think that's God blatantly showing you that, hey, this is your will, this is where you're supposed to be at that day, and you are on the right path. I really believe that. But if you're not in tune with God and you're not looking to follow his will, even when he makes something as painstakingly obvious as that was, you still ain't going to see it. So you have to be in tune with God. You have to be wanting to follow his will and looking for those tracks. And that's what Samuel was doing for Saul. Because he knew, again, this is going to be, Israel had never had a king before. And so you drop the bomb on somebody that, hey, I'm finna make you the very first king of Israel. That's frightening. That's frightening. So he wanted to show Saul that, hey, don't worry about it. I'm with you. Matter of fact, I'm going to show you the proof of you I'm with you. When you leave here, these things are going to happen. And once these things happen, there's going to be enough proof. There should be enough proof of you that I'm with you and I got this thing for you. So just stay on that path. So number 2, from that chapter, when you wholeheartedly follow his will, he will confirm your path. And again, this will help you find his will and follow his will. He's going to confirm it for you. And then number 3, also from this same verse, number 3 is this. You notice where he said here, and it's been a minute since I read, he said, at that time, the Spirit of the Lord will come upon you with power, and you will prophesy with them, and you will be changed into a different person. So number 3, this is something else about the will of God that you have to understand. This is something else. If you, this will help you recognize if you are in His will. If, you know what I'm saying? If He not leaving the breadcrumbs, and He ain't leaving the pennies for you, so you can know for sure that you're in His will. This right here will help you know if you're truly in His will. So number 3 is this, and it's probably gonna be the last one. It's already 8:30, so this is probably the last one I cover tonight. But number 3 is this: the will of God will change you. Do you want to know if you're really in God's will or not? The first thing you do, if you know what I'm saying, you make this, let's say you made a decision yesterday or last week or something. Do you really want to know if you're in His will or not? You're gonna be, the way you can tell if you're really in His will or not, you really follow His will, you're gonna be different. You're gonna change. You know what I'm saying? It's hard for me to believe that you've made a decision to follow God's will and you're still doing the exact same thing. You're not doing nothing different than you were before you made the decision. It's hard for me to believe that. And I know, like I said, that's between you and God, but it's hard for me if I'm on the outside looking in, if I got to be the judge of it, which I'm not, that's between God. But if I'm on the outside looking in, if I'm somebody and I'm looking to see, is this person, serious about his relationship with God, and I'm on the outside looking in, and you tell me, oh, I used to do this, but now I follow God, but yet you still doing those same things you was doing before you made the decision, it's going to be hard for me to believe that you really follow the will of God. Because you can see from here, he said, at that time, the Spirit of the Lord will come upon you with power, and you will prophesy with them, and you will be changed into a different person. See, the will of God is going to change you. The will of God is going to change you. You know what I'm saying? Because it changes your perspective. You know what I'm saying? It changes your perspective. It changes, and when it changes your perspective on things, it changes your priorities. Because you go from living, when you get into the will of God, basically, essentially what you're doing, you telling God or you telling the world, you know what I'm saying? Like when y'all heard my testimony, when I gave my life to God 19 years ago, I went that night, what I did, I'm still the same old John. But what I did, my priority, my perspective on the world changed. My perspective on things that are important changed. My perspective on how I spent my time changed. All those things, my perspective on all these things changed. So when all those things changed, and what I went, and the reason why they changed is because my priority changed. So my priority went from, before I gave my life to God, my priority was living life for myself, getting what I wanted, getting the drugs, getting the women, having the fun, drinking, doing all this stuff. I was living for myself. And when God called me and I accepted his will, I went from living for myself to living for the Lord. See what I'm saying? That's why that changed, because if you really want to follow God's will and you really want to live for the Lord, you're not going to be able to live the way that you was living before you decided to follow his will. There's going to be a change. It's going to be a noticeable change. There's going to be you might be the same person, but you're going to have a noticeable change. You know what I'm saying? Because I remember this guy, I was talking to this guy outside. It was another one of those where God showed me I was on his wheel, because I left, and I've told y'all this story before, but I had left out of jail and I saw this guy sitting down on the steps of the jail as I was leaving. I had just got through preaching, had just got through leading some people to the Lord, so I was actually on my way home because I was done with my work for the day, and I see this guy sitting on the steps. And got to talk to him. Long story short, he was a truck driver and he needed some medicine real bad. So he paid these people, and he was a truck driver, and where I'm at is Waverly, and one of the big truck stops is a Pilot, which is about 20, 30 minutes away, depending on how fast you drive, about 20 minutes away. So he paid these people, he was at this gas station and he needed to get into town to get his medicine. So he paid these people like $50 to take him to the gas station, then bring him back. You know what I'm saying? Go get his medicine. So the people, he gave him $50. They took him to get the medicine. But then when he went inside to grab the medicine, they pulled off and left him there. So now he's stranded, and he figured like he'll walk down to the police station, see if the police will give him a ride back, because he needed to get back to his truck. So just so happened while he was waiting on an officer to come talk to him, I came out. So we got to talking anyway. Long story short, the guy wasn't saved. And I ended up being able to lead him to the Lord. So like I said, it was one of those situations where God was showing me I was on the right path. But at some point, like on the way to, taking him back to his truck, we got to talking, and I was telling him I was a minister, and I was telling him how I used to be a drug dealer and all that. So I remember, telling him about my life and all the women and the drugs and all the stuff that I had, and how, life seemed to be great. And he actually said, man, how is it that you went from that to that? You know what I'm saying? He said, how did you give up all that you had, like which is what every man think they should have, the women, cars, clothes, and all that stuff. He said, how did you give all that up to go to doing this? And I said, because I finally understood for the last 24 years, for the first 24 years of my life, I was living for myself, and it got me nowhere. And I finally realized that if I really want to get ahead in life, if I really want to be successful, then I need to follow God's will for my life and not my own will for my life. And I realized that God was way wiser than I am. He was much better than I am. And therefore his will was going to be better than mine was. And I told him, and at this time I had been serving the Lord, because that was about 4 years ago. So I probably had been serving the Lord about 15 years. And I said, and I told the guy, I said, and over these last 15 years has been the greatest my life has ever been. I've had more success than I ever imagined having. And I said, this is the greatest my life has been. Because what God showed me when he called me to preach that day, my perspective changed, and I realized that his will was better than mine. I said, and I haven't looked back since. And that's when we got to talking, and he was just like, man, how can I have a relationship with the Lord? And it turns out he wasn't saved. And when I got back to his truck, the gas station we was at, I pulled into the side of the parking lot. And I remember, I never forget it, because he would tell me like, well, man, one of the things I struggle with is women. He's like, man, I love me some women. And I love looking at them. I love talking to them and all that. So when we got to the gas station, and you know what I'm saying, you got to where we was at, and I was like, well, man, you don't mind? I said, I go to gospel with you. I said, I can park over here somewhere and go to gospel with you. He said, man, this sounds cool. He said, but let me ask you this. He said, can you park forward so I can't see? He said, because if you park, because I was going back in so we can still kind of see people coming in and out. And he said, man, could you pull in forward? He said, because if I'm able to see and I see some woman walking by, he said, I'm going to be distracted. He said, because I told you my issue is women. He says, I want you to pull forward so I make sure all I can focus on is just listen to you. And I remember I pulled forward. The guy, his name was, never forget his name was Zizalet. It was that's just a very unique name, but his name was Zizalet. And I might be pronouncing it wrong, because, like I said, that's the first time I ever heard it. And I'll never forget it, and so I pulled forward and led him to the Lord. You see what I'm saying? And but his thing, the way he was so threatened, like, how can you give up all that? Because I was telling him, man, I had all this stuff, this material thing, and I said, I still wasn't happy though. I said, I had all these things and I still wasn't happy. I said, the reason why I wasn't happy, because I was living for myself and not living for the Lord. I said, and once I realized that, and I realized that if I live for the Lord is way wiser. He's created all of us. He gave me everything that I had, and he had been blessing me the whole time. I was just turning my back on him. So once I realized that, and I turned my back, turning back to him, You know what I'm saying? I knew that his will was better than my will, and that's why I gave up my will. And I said, I've been successful, been the best 15 years of my life ever since that happened. And this dude was like, man, I want some of that. And like I said, I was able to lead him to the Lord. So again, it's a change. And the thing is, I'm still the same John. Anybody tell you I'm the same John? I still, still silly. I know I get on here and I be serious, but I like to joke around. I love playing practical jokes. I love, telling dad jokes to my daughters because they get so irritated by it. I mean, I'm still the same John, but my priorities has changed. My heart has changed. And see, that's what happened when you really give your heart to God. When you really decide you're going to follow his will, there's a change in your heart. And that's why I say, if you truly make that decision, if you truly decide that you're going to serve the Lord, it's going to be something that people are going to be able to see. You know what I'm saying? People that talk to me, they say, man, you the same old John, but there's something different about you. You know what I'm saying? And they'll say. They won't be able to put their finger on it, but they were like, man, you still the same John. You still silly. And like I told you, I still got a potty mouth from time to time. Don't think, I'm a preacher, I'm all holier than now. I still got a potty mouth. I'm still silly. I still like telling coarse jokes, even though I'm not supposed to. I mean, I'm still, saying inappropriate things at times, sometimes just for shock value. I'm still that, but there's something different about me. And that's what people see. That was what people say. Because the thing is, I went from living, and like I said, your perspective changed on everything. Your priorities change. And the thing is, too, you go from living a worldly life and doing the things that come along with living a worldly life to living a godly life. And that's why I say there's going to be some kind, and it ain't always subtle. It don't happen right off the bat. Because like I told you, I've been serving the Lord for 19 years. The first 10, I was still, people knew that I loved the Lord. I was going to church and all that, but I wasn't doing the work that I'm doing now. So it's only been the last 9 years that I really started preaching. And it's only been the last 7.5, 8 years that I've started soul winning. So it took some time, but I'm definitely not the same dude. Like I said, I'm the same old John, but I'm different. There's different. And the thing is, I went from living a worldly life and living for the world to living for the Lord. And that's what happened. There's going to be some kind of change in you. And that's what he was telling Saul. He said at that time, the power, because the Spirit came into my heart today, then I fully accept the Lord and accept his will for my life. His Spirit came upon me. And I thank him. He's given me a gift to be able to feel it ever since. You know what I'm saying? Whenever I have a good lesson or a good conversation, a good godly conversation with somebody, man, I can feel the Spirit's presence every single time. I've never heard a voice. I've never seen the light, but I do get the chills all over my body when I'm talking to somebody and I'm sharing some wisdom with somebody and I know the Lord is present. You know what I'm saying? I get that. It's been there, you know what I'm saying? I'm a changed person. I can't do, like, you know what I'm saying? And the thing is, this you got to understand. Like I told you, I don't think I'm some super spiritual guy. It ain't that I wouldn't like to go out and drink like I used to. You know what I'm saying? It ain't that I wouldn't think I wouldn't enjoy it if I did it. It ain't that I wouldn't love to smoke weed like I used to. It ain't I think weed is still the same. I mean, it's probably got a lot stronger, but I mean, it still had the same effect that it did back then. It's not that I wouldn't like to go out and get some strange. You know what I'm saying? It ain't that these sins don't still torment me or taunt me or tempt me. It's not that. But what it is, I no longer enjoy doing those things because my heart has changed. It's not that I wouldn't like to do those things. I just don't no longer enjoy to do those things. I would love to be able to go out and smoke or go get some strange or drink or don't have this responsibility I have of leading the lost sheep. But that stuff don't appeal to me no more. You know what I'm saying? Like my flesh was there once, especially like springtime. I used to love smoking around springtime because everything's so beautiful. The everything's come back to life and the weather is just perfect. It's not too hot, not too cold. And oh man, there was nothing I loved more than just rolling me a fat one and smoking and just riding around, listening to my music, looking at nature bloom. I used to love this. So springtime, I always get that nostalgia for smoking. And it's not that I wouldn't like to. It's just that that's no longer my priority. That's not something I want to do. That don't entice me like it used to. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't not that I wouldn't like to go get some strange. You know what I'm saying? Man, what man wouldn't like to? But that no longer entices me like it used to because my priority has changed. You know what I'm saying? Yes, I can go out and do it, but I know if I do that, it's going to mess up everything that the Lord has for me to do. It's going to take me out of his will, and it's going to keep me from having his power. So yes, though I would love that my flesh would love, I'm not gonna sit here and say y'all like I don't think about it or it don't pop up in my head. They don't come across my mind every now and again, especially with the way these women dress these days. I ain't gonna sit here and lie to you like it don't pop up, but that's no longer my priority. I don't no longer enjoy doing those things. You know what I'm saying? My flesh still want it, but my spirit don't. And I've learned to be more in tune with my spirit and to do what my spirit leads me to do instead of being in tune with my flesh and doing what my flesh leads me to do. And see, that's the change. That's why you have that change when you really decide to do the will of God, because you stop following your flesh and start following your spirit. It don't mean that the flesh ain't still trying to pull you in that direction. It's just you stop following. You no longer enjoy the things of the flesh no more, and now you enjoy the spirit. Instead of me going out and hanging out at the club and smoking and spending hours smoking with my friends, I'd rather just get on here and spend hours talking to y'all about Jesus Christ. You see what I'm saying? That's what I enjoy now. I don't enjoy the worldly stuff no more. And that's what you got to understand. That's why it's going to be a change there. You know what I'm saying? It's like, just like I told you, I do drug counseling, and the guy I'm working with now, you know, he's talking about, you know, for the longest, he didn't have a relationship with his folks because he had did so many people wrong. You know what I'm saying? He was on that meth, and I mean, he was stealing and you know what I'm saying, popping pills and all that. So he's messed a lot of people over. You know, he messed a lot of people over. So for the longest, he didn't have a relationship with his folks. But now he's been 3 months clean. And he's really made that change. I've counseled a couple that hadn't really made that change. They was there because, you know, the law told them they had to be there, or their family told them they had to be there, or else. But the last 2 guys I've had, they was there because they had really changed. They had made that change, and they had really given their heart to the Lord and turned their back on that thing. And when you can tell, because they look at things different. They see things different. They do things different. And I remember I was talking to my guy, matter of fact, this week, he was talking about, he said, man, he said, it's so cool that now I have a relationship with my mom again. He said, it's so cool. He said, my mom actually calls me to check on me. He said, for the longest, they didn't want to talk to me. He said, matter of fact, the first time I talked to them after the rehab, you know, it was, which was about 2-3 weeks ago, they went on, because he's from Knoxville, and the rehab center took them on a trip to Gatlinburg, which is not far from Knoxville. So his mom and his sister came up to meet him. And he said, you know, when he had invited them to come up, they were like, well, we'll come, but I'm going to let you know if I see any hint of BS, we're out of here. You know, and he said that was the folks, because they were expecting to be the same old with this guy, because he had been doing it for so long. You know what I'm saying? He had been this addict for so long. And he said, man, I can't tell you how good it felt when I was talking to my mama, and she just out of nowhere said, you've changed. See what I'm saying? It's a noticeable change. When you really get your people will notice that. Like I said, I'm the same old John. Like I said, I'm the same old John. I still have the same old desires, but I'm different. Because those desires are not what I want to give into anymore. Now I want to give into living for the spiritual. That's why the will of God will change. When you decide that you're going to follow the will of God, it's going to change you. Because you're going to see that those things that you used to enjoy was actually hurting you. Those things that you used to enjoy doing, those things you used to spend time doing, those people you used to spend time around, those places you used to spend time going, it was actually hurting you and hindering your progress instead of helping you. You're going to see that now because your perspective has changed. Your perspective on life has changed. And the things that you're doing has changed. Your priority has changed. And that's why I say if you're serious about doing the will of God, there's going to be a change in you. There's going to, at some point, you ain't going to have to blast it. You ain't going to have to announce it. There's just at some point, you're going to be talking to one of your old friends or your old family members, and they just going to be like, you know what, you're different. And they won't be able to figure out what it is. You will know what it is. It's because you're giving your heart to the Lord and you live by the Spirit, no longer living by the flesh. But they won't know that. Like, man, it's something different about you. You know what I'm saying? So they want to say, when you really give into the will of God, there's going to be a change there. There's going to be a change there. Again, you same old you, but there's going to be something different. And the difference is that now that you're giving into the will of God, you're being led by your spirit instead of led by your flesh. You know, there's an example of what I'm talking about here. I've probably used it before, but there was an example, and this is a story my preacher told. He said there was this old Indian chief, and he had these 2 dogs that he would fight all the time. He would go around a little dog fighting circuit, and he would fight these 2 dogs against each other. And he said he always bet on the dog. No, he didn't always bet on the same dog. He would bet on different dog on different nights. But no matter which dog he betted on, he always won. You know what I'm saying? So he said one day this young teenage boy, he said, you know, had been watching him for some time, and he came up to him. He said, how you know which dog gonna win? He said, you never bet on the same dog every night. And he said, but no matter which one you bet on, you always win. He said, how do you know which one you're gonna win? He said, well, it's simple. He said, if I want the black dog to win, and I want the white dog to lose, then I feed the black dog and I starve the white dog. He said, but if I want the white dog to win and the black dog to lose, then I feed the white dog and starve the black dog. So the point is, whichever one you give into, whichever one you feed the most, whether it's your flesh or your spirit, that's the one that's going to win out. See, so when you accept the will of God, what you're saying, when God is calling you and you're accepting God's will, essentially what you're saying, I'm no longer going to feed my flesh. I'm going to from now on feed my spirit. That don't mean that your flesh ain't still hungry. Like I said, it don't mean that the flesh ain't going to tempt you. It's just that you no longer enjoy doing those fleshly things because you now have a different outlook on the world. You now have a different perspective. You now have different priorities. And you know that if you feed that flesh, it's going to keep you from doing that thing that God has for you to do. And that's what you got to understand. That's why I say, if you really make that, if you won't know, am I really in the will of God? Then if you look at yourself and see, has there been a change? And like I said, you might say, well, I've changed. I don't do this. What does other people say about you? Because they're going to say it. They're going to say it at some point. If you hang out, if you really made that change and you come across somebody that you haven't seen a year, 2, 3 years, or since you made that change, been a year or two, or maybe even a few months since you made that change. Like I said, this guy that I'm working with now, it's been 3 months since he's been clean, since he's made that change. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, when he went and hung out with his mom and his sister the other day, they said it's something different about you. Like, I really believe you have changed. The guy before him I worked with, same thing. Everybody like, man, it's something different about you. You really have changed. And it's going to be you can't say that you're going to do the will of God. You're going to start obeying God. You're going to be in alignment with God and still be the same crappy person you was before. There's going to be some things that you can't do that you used to do. Like I said, it's not that I wouldn't like to smoke weed no more. I just can't. I can't smoke weed no more. It's not that I wouldn't enjoy it if I did. I'm pretty sure if I did it, I would enjoy it. I just can't. I can't do that no more. That's not something that I can do. And if I did do it, my country was bothering me the entire time. Same with drinking. I just can't no more. I get offered drinks all the time, especially, with my company. We be having these big parties and stuff, free liquor. My company, they buy the bar out kind of thing. I just can't. It don't appease me no more, but it's just my priorities has changed and I just can't do it no more. You know what I'm saying? Getting out there and get some strange. I know I still look. I'm like, look, it's springtime, you know what I'm saying? It's about to be what they call them sundress time, you know what I'm saying? I still look, but I'm not finna chase. I'm not finna slide in nobody DMs. You know what I'm saying? That stuff don't be. I got different priorities now. I can't do that anymore. I know I got my wife. I know my purpose. I know what I need to be doing. And my priority is serving the will of God. I've told y'all before, Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and the rest of these things shall be added unto you. So I just keep seeking God, and the rest of that stuff will come when in its due time. You know what I'm saying? But there's been a change. Like I said, I'm the same old John. Anybody that know me know I'm the same old John, but there's something different. And the difference is now, instead of living for the world and living to please myself, now I live for the Lord. So when those little situations come up, it don't bother me. It's not hard. It's not hard for me to be around people that smoking weed and still say no. It don't bother me because it's no longer my priority to please myself. It's my priority to please the Lord. And that'll help you go a long way. But you got to make the decision in your heart that I'm really going to be in the will of God. I really want to follow the will of God. I really want to do whatever it takes for me to get in God's will. And like I said, if you make that decision and you start living for it, and somebody else like, man, you've changed, especially like the people that's close to you, man, you changed, you're different. You're going to hear that. And I'm not going to say you're not going to have to broadcast. You're going to be talking to somebody one day and you're going to be talking some stuff and they're going to say, you've changed. You really have changed. And you can be like, you ain't gonna even think about like, I guess I have. And it'll hit you like, well, I guess I have. And you'll know the change that you've made is you went to living for the Lord. You made God your priority instead of yourself. That's really the only change you make. And that's what you do when you're telling God that I'm gonna serve your purpose and your will in my life. You basically saying, instead of living for myself, from now I'm gonna live for you. And that's the change. And when you do really make that decision, people will see it. People will see it. There will be a change. People will see it, and you will be able to find success in the will of God because you really made that change in your heart. You change your perspective. You change your priority, and now you're doing the work that God truly has for you to do. So I'm gonna stop there. I thought I was gonna make it past 3 again tonight, but I'm gonna stop right there. But again, I'm harping on these things. I'm really spending my time with these things because it's so important. Like, honestly, like I told y'all, that's what changed my life tonight. I decided that I was gonna make that change, and I will give my life to serving God's will. Was the night my life changed forever, and that's what I've been living this last 19 years. And I say I'm still the same John, but I'm different. Because I made the decision. I want y'all to have that same moment where you decide to give your whole heart to the Lord as well, so you can also find success in His will. So with that being said, I'm going to stop right there. I thought I was going to finish up this little first part of chapter 10, but next week should be the last lesson on the will of God. I know it's been 7, now it's going to be 8, but it's because it's so important. You know what I'm saying? You got to make the decision, y'all. And like I said, when you make the decision, you know what I'm saying, the Lord, like we talked about tonight, one, you got to understand, if you're going to get in the will of God, it's not going to align with your will. That was what we covered. That was the first thing we covered. We got to understand that the Lord's will not always be in agreement with your will. 9 times out of 10, He's going to take you out of your comfort zone and take you from the place that you're comfortable at, put you somewhere you're not comfortable at, doing things you're not comfortable with doing, around people you're not comfortable with being around. That's the will of God. That's how I roll. Number 2, when you wholeheartedly follow His will, He's going to confirm your path. He's going to have little stuff happen to show you that, hey, you're on the right path and you're where you're supposed to be at, doing what you're supposed to be doing. And then number 3, the will of God is going to change you. If you really make the decision to follow the will of God for your life, it's going to change you. You're not going to be able to be the same person you were before you start following His will. So with that being said, I said next Monday, Lord willing, I'll be back. We'll get into chapter 10 again. And you got to understand, we got like 6 lessons out of chapter 9. So this is on the first one out of 10. And I don't think it's going to be as many as chapter 9, not as long with chapter. But you know what I'm saying, it is, I do think it's beneficial for us to take this time and really understand what it means to find the will of God for your life and what you need to know to do and know and what you need to do so you can follow that will. Because again, the second most important decision outside of making that decision to accept Jesus Christ your Savior. So Lord willing, next Monday night, 7 o'clock, be back here. We're going to finish, we're going to go and get into another lesson in chapter 10. I'm going to say finish. We might finish, we might not. Never know how it goes. But of course, if there's anything that I haven't covered already in this story that I haven't already presented, please reach out to me and let me know. If it's something that you just touching your heart, Lord, Brother John, I would love to see you, do a lesson on this. Let me know. I can work that into my lesson plan. None of this stuff. No, this is for y'all. You know what I'm saying? When I come on here, and that was one thing I didn't get to on my point of number 4. When I come on here before I put these lessons together, Lord, just guide me to where I need to go. I don't want to just get on here and tell y'all what I want y'all to hear or what I think y'all need to hear. I want to get on here and tell y'all what y'all need to hear. You know what I'm saying? That's why I always ask the Spirit to guide me in the direction I need to go when I put these lessons together. So again, if you got something that you want me to talk about I haven't, please reach out to me and let me know. Keep sharing the videos, telling other people about the videos. It's always public. Help this ministry grow. I know there's a lot of people out here that need to hear this gospel. I don't have a big ministry, but man, I would love for people to really get this and so they can start living. Because you look at the way the world is going, it's because we've all gotten out of the will of God. Nobody's really following the will of God for their life anymore, and that's why our country is going the direction it's going. So man, if this can help somebody get back there, please let them share it with them, tag them in it so they can have that the information they need to find God's will for their life. And of course, if you're not in the will of God if you're not saved. Then you haven't even started on the right path. You're not saved. So of course, if you're not sure about your salvation, please reach out to me and let me know. I will set up some time in my schedule to go over the plan of salvation with you, tell you what you need to know so you can know when you go through that door called death, you'll get to see the Lord on the other side. And if you need any kind of spiritual counseling or got any questions or anything of that nature, please reach out to me and let me know, and I'll work some time in my schedule so I can do the counseling with you. And as always, if y'all want to catch some of my older sermons, all my sermons, I do them on here on Mondays, and then usually on Sundays, I download them to my YouTube page so you can catch all my older stuff, even because this is part 7 of this lesson. So if you want to go back and listen to the other 6, you can either scroll up and down my Facebook page and find them, or you can be easier, you just go to my YouTube page because they're all in order in which I put them on there, download on my YouTube page. So God's Servant / Lost Sheep Ministry. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That way, whenever I upload a new video, if that's the way you watch me, you'll be able to know and you'll be alerted that I upload a new video. So again, thank y'all for joining me tonight. Appreciate y'all working with me through this lesson. I know it's been a long series and we're going to finish it up here soon, but I'm not going to rush it as well because it's so important for y'all understanding how important it is to find God's will for your life. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pray so we can get out of here. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, thank you so much for watching over us tonight. Thank you for giving me another opportunity to bring this lesson forward, Lord. I'm always praying for your will for these videos. I don't want to just get on here and just talk and just give my opinions and talk about things that I want to talk about, Lord. I always ask you to guide me in direction so I can give the wisdom, share the wisdom, and give people the guidance they need so they can have a close relationship with you, so they can do what they need to do to follow your will. And I pray that these words that were spoken here tonight will touch the hearts of the people, whoever that will tune into the video, what they did it while they was live or they watch it later. I pray you just put it on their hearts and give them the want to listen to the wisdom, absorb this wisdom into their heart, and use it so they can build a solid foundation so they can have a close relationship with you. As you continue to watch over my family, continue to watch over continue to watch over my family, continue to watch over this ministry, and just continue to use me, my family, this ministry, and its members in a mighty way, Lord, to do our part to honor and glorify your name, actually build your kingdom, and turn the hearts of this people back to you, Lord. I pray you watch over this world, Lord, the way this world is going, and all of the foolishness that we've accepted, and the wickedness that we've accepted as part of our society these days. It breaks my heart to see it, that we're going in this direction, but we're going this direction because we got out of your will. So I pray that you just bring us back in, Lord. I pray for the day when the world as a whole, we will humble ourselves, pray, seek your face, and turn from our wicked ways, so you may hear from heaven, forgive our sins, and heal our lands. I ask you to be with all my ministry members, Lord, all those people that's tuned in tonight. Give them your power, love, and wisdom over any problem may arise in their lives that may keep them doing the work you have for them to do, and just be with them as they're going through whatever situation they're going through. I know we're all going through something, but I pray you help them feel your presence in their lives. Help them to see that whatever they're going through is part of your will, and give them the encouragement they need to continue to go through so they may come out of the other side of that fire purified, and you can use them to honor and glorify your name because of their testimony of their faithfulness, Lord. Continue to watch over us all. Continue to bless us and guide us all. Keep us safe as we get ready to rest up as we end this day. Help us be able to have a good, safe night of rest and wake up tomorrow ready to once again honor and glorify your name, serve your purpose and your will in our lives. We thank you for all you've done and given. Thank you for this time spent here tonight. And I pray this time will be used, the productive time, productive video, and this time will be used to honor and glorify your name and continue to actively build your kingdom. We love you and thank you so much for all you've done and given. And we say this prayer in your wonderful son, Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So I appreciate y'all being in here, Miss Alicia, Bishop Patrick. I saw you sneak. I didn't see you sneaking there, man. I hope you had a good night. I don't know when you came in, but if you didn't catch the whole thing, and always go back and watch it from the beginning. But I appreciate all y'all being here. Continue to keep me in your prayers. I continue to pray for y'all. I pray this lesson is helping y'all. But again, if there's anything else you want to talk about or anything else you want to do, let me know. But if not, we'll be back next Monday, same bat channel, same bat time. So until then, I love you all. Remember to always watch your back and pray. Keep me in your prayers, and I'll do the same for y'all. But until next time, I love y'all. Peace.